Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before beginning today's program, the Embassy of the Dominican Republic in the United States of America and the country's permanent mission to the OAS would like to take a moment to recognize a public service that inspires and that dignifies public duty. We wish to acknowledge Minister Alvarez, your unwavering commitment to the principles of diplomacy. Under your leadership, Dominican foreign policy has strengthened international cooperation, defended human rights, and projected our country as a relevant voice in the international community. But equally important, at home, among the corridors of our beautiful foreign ministry, your decisiveness and vision have led a major transformation: the professionalization of our nation's foreign service. And that alone is a hefty legacy for all of us who make up our country's diplomatic corps. For all those reasons, from our hearts today surges a spontaneous desire to present to you, Minister Alvarez, a recognition that is both a gesture of gratitude and a token of confidence in what lies ahead. In the name of our institutions and of those that have witnessed your dedication, we say thank you, Minister Alvarez, for your ongoing exemplary service and for your legacy to the Dominican diplomatic profession. May you remain steadfast in your mission.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting this. They say that when you start receiving farewells, recognitions is when you're on your way out. You didn't ask for permission for this, by the way. But I am highly appreciative. I really am honored. And I thank you that you have chosen Dominican Week in the US, of which I was one of the founders many, many years ago. And so indeed, it is really a privilege to receive this before you all. Thank you. Thank you.
We're all delighted with this recognition, which highlights all that the minister has done to expand and strengthen our trade ties with the world, especially with the United States, our principal commercial partner. Now, continuing with our program, we invite the Ambassador Mayerlin Cordero to deliver some opening remarks to this event. An applause for her.
Good morning, His Excellency Roberto Alvarez, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic, Her Excellency Celines Toribio, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs for Dominican Communities Abroad, Her Excellency Maria Isabel Castillo, Ambassador of the Dominican Republic to the United States, Madame Francesca Rainieri, Chair of the Dominican American Chamber of Commerce, OES permanent representative and observers, members of the AmCham DR and the Dominican delegation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a distinct honor to introduce an accomplished statesman and diplomat, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic, Ambassador Roberto Alvarez. I feel especially privileged to present him today, as I had the honor of serving as his deputy during his tenure as permanent representative of the Dominican Republic to this organization. Working closely with him provided me not only with invaluable professional experience, but also with the opportunity to witness firsthand his dedication to multilateralism and his vision for the region. This very Hall of the America holds a special meaning in that shared journey. It was here, as chair of the OES Permanent Council, that Minister Alvarez administered the oath of office to Secretary General Albert Randim in his previous capacity as Assistant Secretary General. Minister Alvarez has distinguished himself through his profound expertise in inter-American relations and the hemispheric agenda, with a focus on critical issues such as human rights, democracy, security, and development. His extensive professional experience also includes work as a researcher and author of numerous articles and books on human rights and international relations. Today, we have the privilege of attending his lecture, The Dominican Republic in an Uncertain Geopolitical World, where he will share his insights on the challenges facing not only our country, but the entire region, emphasizing the importance of multilateralism in an increasingly polarized global community. Señoras y señores, el canciller Álvarez cuenta con una reconocida trayectoria y un liderazgo firme y visionario en defensa de la democracia, los derechos humanos y la integración regional. Bajo su conducción, la diplomacia dominicana ha impulsado una agenda activa y responsable, contribuyendo con propuestas sustantivas a los desafíos globales y regionales, desde la seguridad multidimensional hasta la promoción del desarrollo sostenible. Su voz en foros multilaterales y en encuentros bilaterales refleja no solo la visión del gobierno dominicano, sino también el sentir de una nación que valora profundamente la paz, la solidaridad y la cooperación. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to my esteemed Minister Alvarez. Thank you.
Good morning. There are a lot of memories in this room. I had the good fortune of coming before this OES Hall of the Americas for the very first time, and this will obviously date me in 1968. I was a very young Foreign Service officer at the time, posted here at the Embassy of the Dominican Republic. So, as you may well imagine, then later on I served at the Secretariat of the OAS from 1970 to 78. My office was right downstairs. So, a lot of memories, including the 3 years that I served as Dominican ambassador to the OAS from 2005 to 2008, and had the privilege of chairing the Permanent Council. And I am highly appreciative of all the ambassadors that I see here today, from Ronald, Luz Elena. Thank you for the ambassadors of Argentina, Peru, and several others. The interim representative of the United States, and if I miss Any others, please forgive me. But I see a lot of faces. Ambassador Robin Bernstein and lots of other functionaries, but Dominicans, friends, all of those who braved the maze to get here this morning. Thank you. Let me begin by addressing, first of all, the 10th Summit of the Americas. As most of you know, the Dominican Republic will host, first week of December, the 10th Summit. And most of you know that the chosen theme is building a secure, sustainable, and prosperous hemisphere together. It has certain aspects of similarity with the UN theme for this year, which is better together, 80 years and more of building peace, sustainable development, and human rights. Anyway, our summit, the 10th Summit, will be advanced in 4 fronts: the Youth Forum, Civil Society Forum, the CEO Forum, and of course, the Heads of State and Government Forum. The invitations have been sent out for all of them. The invitations for the Heads of State and Government just went out about a week ago, but we have already started to receive acceptances from several presidents already. President Abinader will probably make it known sometime in the near future. We hope that other acceptances will be arriving soon as well. For the 10th Summit of the Americas, we decided that the CEO Summit, scheduled for December the 3rd and the 4th, should be the centerpiece of the summit. We have observed over the years that at these gatherings, the private sector leaders have been even more energetic and ambitious than the government counterparts to advance the economic integration of the Americas. So it's no secret that polarization in our hemisphere at the moment has undermined the adoption of regional policies that should underpin the unleashing of capital for sustainable development, economic growth, and social progress. We believe that the December summit at Punta Cana is a precious opportunity to cultivate common ground on a practical, constructive agenda to mobilize human and financial capital for the mutual benefit of each of our countries and all of our peoples. For decades, under many democratically elected leaders, the Dominican Republic has been committed to public-private consensus building and concerted action, a tradition that has served us well. In this light, we aim to turn the CEO Summit into a forum for the frank exchange of ideas among political leaders and private entrepreneurs. We hope that practical dialogue will jumpstart a positive agenda where governments and private enterprises can cooperate more effectively to unlock our shared future in essential sectors such as energy, agriculture, tourism, supply chains, and logistics. Our purpose in emphasizing the CEO Summit is clear. By putting the practical concerns of entrepreneurs front and center in this hemispheric dialogue, we hope to invigorate practical and impactful public policies that will create the most economic opportunity for the most people. If we spark that kind of exchange, the 10th Summit of the Americas at Punta Cana will help our political and economic leaders grow together in every sense. Let me address now Haiti, which is a security priority for the DR and for the region. You are aware that we share with Haiti a complex historical relationship, an inescapable neighborhood, and human and economic interdependence. Since colonial times, there have been movement of peoples as well as trade on both sides. Over the years, Haitian labor has been an important component of key economic sectors of the Dominican economy, in particular agriculture and construction. Haiti is our second most important export market after the United States. Between 2010 and 2025, Dominican exports exceeded 15.5 billion, compared with imports of 272 million. In addition, informal cross-border trade is estimated by our central bank at around 400 million per year. In August 2020, when President Abinader first took office, he initiated a process which sought to build a strong cooperation with the Haitian government. Since the beginning, we engaged then President Jovenel Moïse in a constructive dialogue, culminating in a meeting between the two presidents and the adoption of a 9-point joint declaration in January of 2021. Tragically, the assassination of Moïse on July 7, 2021, derailed that plan, as Haiti descended into political instability and chaos, aggravated by the many armed and violent criminal organizations that flourished after the Magnicide. Today, the Haitian crisis represents our principal security risk and one of the main preoccupations of the hemisphere. The Security Council of the UN has taken important steps since 2023. Sanctions, an arms embargo, and a multinational security mission, the MSS, in support of the Haitian police. However, that MSS never moved beyond the deployment phase due to insufficient funding, personnel, and equipment. Additionally, it has a weak mandate that is not conducive to restoring under order, protecting the population, or strengthening the Haitian National Police. The US and Panama have proposed to the UN Security Council a new resolution that is now being considered, actively considered, that seeks to transform the MSS into an effective, and this is the term that is being used at the moment in the project resolution, a gang suppression force. This new framework for international support would have a clearer mandate and a greater number of operatives, 5,500, with the UN in charge of logistics and operational support, including its financing. The Dominican government fully supports this option. So far, Russia and China have proposed another resolution, rolling the current MSS mandate for 1 more year, but the new project has now gone through at least 3 revisions and is, as I said, being actively negotiated at the moment. We remain hopeful that negotiations will yield a compromise that will allow the mission to evolve into a more effective tool of security and stability. We are engaging our partners in the Americas and beyond to contribute to the success of this mission. Once stability has been achieved, we hope, and the dire humanitarian crisis is abated, investment and cooperation opportunities would open up in Haiti, and particularly in light manufacturing and cross-border value chains, by developing dry ports, following models from Costa Rica and Panama, or Chile and Bolivia, as well as at the highly successful binational industrial zone of Codevi in Dajabon. Let me turn now to the DR-US bilateral relations. Over 140 years, the US has become our most strategic partner in politics, trade, security, as well as the nations that host the largest Dominican community abroad. Around 2.8 million people of Dominican origin reside in this country. The importance of this relationship was highlighted by Secretary Rubio. His first official foreign trip visited Panama, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and the Dominican Republic. If I had to pick one aspect that represents the importance of this relationship, it would be a robust two-way trade. The 10-year balance of our trade in goods between 2015 and 2024 totaled $154 billion, not pocket change. 98.5 billion in US exports to the Dominican Republic and 56.2 billion in Dominican exports to the US. The US market consumes 56% of our exports and is the origin of 41% of our imports. The net result is that over those 10 years, the United States had a favorable trade balance of $42.2 billion with the Dominican Republic. Believe it or not, the US is the 7th largest trade US has with the Dominican Republic, the 7th largest trade surplus in the world. 7th largest trade surplus with the Dominican Republic in the world. As you can see in this list, the DR appears as number 9. However, when we met earlier this year with US Trade Representative Ambassador Jameson Greer, and I handed over the list, he quickly said, no, you're number 7, because the Netherlands and Hong Kong are major transit points for goods. Over the same 10-year period, the Dominican Republic received from the US around $10 billion in foreign direct investment, more than $63.6 billion in remittances, and 22 million tourists. A third of the total FDI, foreign direct investment, and 44% of total international arrivals. Security cooperation is another pillar of our relationship. Our progress rests on close collaboration with US agencies, most notably the Drug Enforcement Administration. In the 5 years since President Abinader took office, Dominican security forces have seized nearly 200,000 kilos of illicit drugs, which is more than 2.5 times the quantity confiscated, 77,000 kilos, in the previous 16 years. We have also taken decisive legal and policy measures that complement US actions. Earlier this year, the DR designated 26 Haitian gangs as terrorist organizations. And earlier this month, we also designated the Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist group to prevent its penetration of our territory. Given our broad and deep relationship with the United States, we remain hopeful that we can negotiate a fairer deal to scrap any new tariff or that 10% on existing on Dominican goods. Although we are in the lower tier of reciprocal tariffs, we believe that our mutually beneficial partnership with the United States and the considerable surplus that the US enjoys in our trade balance should justify leveling the playing field with the USMCA countries of Mexico and Canada that have a 0%, no 10% tariff on goods that meet the USMCA rules of origin, and that we should have an equivalent deal so that we are not in a disadvantage with competing goods with USMCA countries. So, where is the DR today? We are entering late 2025 with solid macroeconomic fundamentals and democratic stability, and in a position of advantage relative to the rest, good number of countries in the region. While growth this year is projected between 3% and 4%, below the historical average of 5%, it exceeds the 2% outlook for Latin America and the Caribbean reported by CEPAL. We also remain, according to the IMF, the country in the region converging most rapidly toward the United States in per capita income. In that context, per capita GDP rose 34% between 2019 and 2024, from $8,600 to $11,541. Poverty fell from 26% in 2019 to 18% in 2025, and the middle class now comprises 50% of the population, up from 38% in 2019. We have also lowered undernourishment from 8.6 in 2018 to 3.6 in 2025, and hopefully by 2027, we will be at zero hunger. This progress is no accident. It reflects targeted social protection, a strong jobs recovery, macroeconomic stability, and the dynamism of tourism, free trade zones, remittances, and investment. Credit agencies share our positive viewpoint. For example, Fitch affirmed a rating of BB- with a positive outlook in November 2024, and Moody's upgraded our rating to Ba2 with a stable outlook on August 2025, just a month ago. The labor market confirms this trajectory. Unemployment stands at 4.8% in 2025, down from 6% in 2019. Informality declined from 58% in 2021 to 54% in 2024. The reduction is gradual and remains a structural challenge we must face with determination. External drivers also show a positive trend. In 2024, we welcomed a record 11.2 million visitors, up from 7.5 million in 2019. Remittances grew 11.6% year over year between January and July 2025 and are projected to exceed 11.3 billion by year end. Foreign direct investment, which reached a record 4.5 billion in 2024, is expected to rise by 15.3% this year and could reach 5.2 billion. Notably, roughly a quarter of that investment is flowing into renewable energy, underpinning a steady transition toward a cleaner, more resilient energy matrix. Installed renewable capacity surpassed 1.4 gigawatts in 2024, about 23% of total capacity, with additional solar, wind, and storage projects in the pipeline. Similarly, logistics capacity is expanding apace. For example, DP World signed, this is the largest port in the Dominican Republic, that handles Caucedo Port. They signed this past May a $760 million agreement to expand its port and its free trade zone, increasing container capacity from 2.5 million TEUs to around 3.1 million. In health, one of the earliest achievements of President Luis Abinader's administration was moving the country close to universal coverage under the family health insurance programs by enrolling 2.5 million additional people in the public insurance company. This has eased access to services and strengthened positive trends. Life expectancy for Dominicans increased from 73.5 years in 2016 to 75.1 years in 2024, and infant mortality fell 20.9 to 59% per 1,000 live births between 2019 and 2024. However, we must recognize remaining challenges, particularly maternal mortality, which even with the improvement from 169 to 143 deaths per 100,000 live births between 2021 and 2023, still demands intensified efforts to meet regional standards. Citizen security has also improved steadily. Homicide rate declined from 15.2 per 100,000 in 2016 to 8.3 so far this year. This reduction, among the most notable in the region, reflects stronger prevention and policing capacities while maintaining a firm commitment to civil liberties and due process of law. Digital connectivity is reinforcing this modernization. Today, 91% of Dominicans have internet access, most through smartphones. This infrastructure expands financial inclusion, education, and innovation, and opening opportunities for households and businesses alike. Institutional strengthening underpins these results. Our government has remained at the forefront of the fight against corruption and for transparency. The Dominican Republic stands as a regional leader in open government. In July, we hosted the OAS Public Security Ministers, underscoring an agenda that advances police reform and both cyber and citizen security. Equally important, Dominican governance today is well-grounded in democratic dialogue. In the May 2024 elections, in which President Abinader handily won a second term, the Partido Revolucionario Moderno won extraordinary 3/4 majorities in both houses of the Dominican Congress. Speaking on election night before an audience of triumphant followers, rather than seizing political advantage, President Abinader asserted that the imposing mandate made it even more important to seek broad consensus with all Dominicans. In May of this year, President Abinader met with former Presidents Leonel Fernández, Hipólito Mejía, and Danilo Medina to forge a unified state policy on Haiti. They convened the Economic and Social Economic Council, which is an official body composed of civil society organizations, trade unions, the private sector, the government, and the principal political parties, with the objective of coordinating the dialogue. After months of intensive work, a final report was consolidated, including proposals on migration, border development, trade, security, and international cooperation. Finally, democratic values across society remain strong. We're committed to liberal democracy with alternation in power through the ballot box, a multi-party system, freedom of speech and press, and respect for private property as the basis of civic life. In that spirit, the President presented a constitutional reform initiative last August to lock in term limits, an initiative approved in October of last year, with provisions that make it much more difficult to reform the constitutional norm regarding the two-term limit. Our country's economic stability and appeal to investors is due in no small part to the President's fundamental commitment to the fight against public corruption. His designation of two successive, independent, nonpartisan attorneys generals who were recommended by a committee of experts is nothing short of transformational. And their ongoing independent investigations of public corruption without fear of favor are well documented in our independent media. With realism and confidence, we can say that the country has advanced tangibly. I do not claim we're a model for others to follow. Rather, that we Dominicans have our own model of development that with strengths and weaknesses is an expression of who we are as a people, what we value, and most importantly, how hard we work to build our place in the world with dignity and justice. Where to? And where, might one ask, will this path take us next? Since 1991, the Dominican Republic has enjoyed the fastest rate of average yearly growth in the Americas. Having reached upper middle income status in 2011, it has developed a very fruitful working relationship with the OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, including membership in some of its key bodies, detailed policy reviews performed in areas such as competition, development, education, innovation, public government, and public integrity. We're now developing a roadmap towards full membership in that body. President Abinader issued Presidential Decree 408-25, which has officially launched the process. This path will bring about profound transformations in our economy, institutions, and society. Another objective announced by the President, which aligns with OECD membership, is the intention to double the Dominican Republic's GDP by 2036. The commitment to OECD membership is expected to support this goal, as it involves implementing public policies such as raising educational standards, establishing a more progressive and inclusive tax system, and adopting recognized anti-corruption practices. To drive this effort, the government has created the Meta 2036 Commission in collaboration with the private sector as a catalog of sectoral and cross-cutting initiatives. There are a number of working groups have been set up precisely to determine that roadmap in great detail. The Commission is working with the support of the Inter-American Development Bank, has adopted an executive roundtable methodology, setting forth a thorough roadmap, as I said, too detailed to explain here today, to achieve the goals of Meta 2036. That project, Meta 2036, is not a slogan. It is a logically sequenced, financially sound, public-private plan. And it will require the joint effort of the public sector with the private sector working hand in glove in order to achieve it. There is just no other way. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a changing world in which certainties are challenged and new demands are emerging. But there's also a world that offers myriad opportunities to those who read its trends in time, strengthen their alliances, and bet on stability, innovation, inclusiveness, and international cooperation. That is the path the Dominican Republic has chosen. A foreign policy with vision, realism, and a sense of opportunity in the service of our people and committed to our values. Thank you very much.
We all thank so much to the minister for this long and detailed speak about the relationship of the Dominican Republic. Long, but it was nice for everyone here that we came here to get it. Now we move on to the Q&A session that's going to be moderated by Mr. Stephen Puig, Vice President of AmCham DR and Chair of the Bilateral Relations Committee. Thank you everyone for being here, and now move on to the Q&A session.
Well, thank you very much, Minister, for your comprehensive overview of the relations the Dominican Republic has had with the United States, with the region, with the upcoming summit. Oh, sorry. Testing, there we go, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for your comprehensive overview of the relationship that the DR has had with the United States, with the region, with what will be taking place shortly at the Summit of the Americas in a few months, with our development overall as a country in terms of economics, socially, and as well as our democracy. Thank you very much for that comprehensive overview. I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions, but I think the important thing is that we have an open mic here so that all of you can also ask questions. I have a couple that are prepared, and then we can ask further questions of the minister, who will be with us for approximately 12 to 13 minutes. So I'll start by making a reference to your comments regarding the Summit of the Americas. You mentioned that the CEO Summit is going to be a centerpiece during this edition of the Summit of the Americas. And you also highlighted the work that's been done for decades now in terms of the public and private sectors in the DR as a factor that has contributed to the development of our country. And now that we have so many of us from the private sector that are here during Dominican Week, what can we best do as the private sector to help transmit this to our visitors? We're working closely with you and your team in terms of making sure we get a good level of attendance. What can we do when we actually have the attendees there in the country that might help project that even further, and perhaps have some of this brush off on some of our neighbors as well?
Thank you for the question, Stephen. First of all, you can start by working right now in mobilizing the business sector, those individuals that have been invited. The private sector, we have distributed now the list of about 1,400 private sector individuals of the Americas, the entire hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, that have been invited. So the importance now is of trying to get to those individuals and get them to the summit, December the 3rd and 4th. So that should be the first task. Then, in terms of how to transmit what we, the Dominican government, have been doing in this public-private alliance, one of the things we are doing precisely is a pabellón país, a stand on the Dominican Republic, where it will be an interactive stand being developed right now on areas such as energy, tourism, infrastructures, and so on. Precisely being developed by CONEP with the assistance of Juan Vicini and others. On the public sector side, Pro Dominicana, Viviana Ribeiro is coordinating the public sector. They're working together in presenting this important, I think, stand on how we have gotten, some of the major projects that showcase the Dominican Republic. And by being present, finally, at the summit itself, the contingent of Dominicans, and interacting, Dominican private sector above all, women and men, and interacting with their peers of the hemisphere actively in trying, obviously, to make business deals during the private sector forum.
Thank you. The other question that came to mind as I listened to you was something that you actually said 5 years ago and repeated now. I recall that 5 years ago, when you became foreign minister for the Dominican Republic and we had Semana Dominicana, you gave a speech at Georgetown University. And I recall that the main point of that speech was that unequivocally, the main ally that the Dominican Republic has is the United States, something that you were echoing today as well. And one of the things that we've seen as AmCham is that we've gone from nearshoring to what's being called ally shoring now as well. And if anything, it's very clear that the DR has a very close relationship with the US, and the US is the most important ally that we have. How can we continue to develop that alliance? What would you recommend today, thinking on what's changed over the last 5 years? As the private sector, what recommendations would you have for us to help strengthen that alliance with the US at this point?
Well, I think it's basically to continue what we have already constructed, which is quite a bit. When our government came into office in August of 2020, a lot of the fundamentals were already in place. For example, not only in the issues I've mentioned, whether it's tourism or trade and so on, in direct investment, but as an example, and this is something that President Dominican mentions oftentimes, all, without exception, Major League Baseball teams, US baseball teams, have an academy in the Dominican Republic. This was a fact of life when we came into office. And by the way, as President Dominican mentions often, the investments for the lodgings and all of the infrastructures and so on that the 40 academies have in the Dominican Republic, they invest about $500 million a year into the Dominican economy, in addition to, of course, being the testing ground for all of those great baseball players. I think it's 11 or 12% of Major League Baseball players are of Dominican origin. And we aim to take that percentage even higher. So again, I think it is, Stephen, just to continue to work patiently with the US government in developing the excellent relationship that we have, working with our like-minded friends in creating even greater opportunity. In part, it is up to us. We shouldn't be waiting for, obviously, for the United States to just create new opportunities, but we should also be looking for them.
Thank you, Minister. With that, I'd like to open up the mic if anyone has questions that they'd like to address to the Minister. Yes, please. Jose Alfredo. If you could please introduce yourself so everyone could know whom you are, whom you represent as well.
Good morning, Minister Alvarez. My name is Jose Alfredo Rizek. I'm the managing partner of Rizek Abogados in the Dominican Republic. You touched on a very important issue that goes to the heart of AmCham and the Dominican Week, which is the Dominican diaspora. I remember when you and I left the public sector back in 2008, you were actually my first client in the private practice, and you were looking at making easier the ability of the Dominicans to send out remittances to the Dominican Republic and mobile payments and all that. So the question goes as to how can the government and the private sector better engage that Dominican diaspora in terms of partnering for local businesses and investments in the Dominican Republic? What advice can you give us on that end?
This is one of the conundrums that we face now, actually. And I look around and I see, for example, the Mexican ambassador here to the OAS. We should learn from those countries such as Mexico, who have a diaspora of far longer standing in the United States. And who have, for example, in comparison to our 8 consulates in the US, they have about, is it 53 or 54 consulates throughout the United States? But not only that, they have a number of programs, outreach programs, that we have not developed fully yet. And one of the things that is happening, I'm sure that it's happened also to the Mexican community in the United States and others as well, but that second and third generations are starting to distance themselves culturally from their origins. And we are not actually, so far, we've not yet developed projects that are able to get to those sectors, particularly the youths. And believe me, we know, for example, in certain areas like New York, you go anywhere and you find young Dominicans or Dominican origins everywhere. And yet, I don't think that we have established a way of developing a strong connection with that community, or of mobilizing them effectively to integrate into the US, which is what we should be seeking to do, rather than be looking to mobilize them politically. This is my view. I'm speaking now not necessarily as a foreign minister, but my personal view, that rather than be looking at them, as so often happens, as getting them involved in political life at home. Not that we don't do that, but that we also focus more on getting them to progress and advance within the community here in the United States, so that we can get more political power, a little bit more political power. And this is, again, something that Mexico and other countries have been doing and doing effectively. And if we do that, inevitably you will be able to mobilize those human capital resources into sort of investments, either that community or through the networks that you establish of mobilizing for greater investment in the Dominican Republic. That's my view.
If I could comment on that, Minister, I have to say you're being modest, because under your leadership at Cancilleria, we've seen what the index is doing. I think there's a long way to go, certainly, in terms of the direction that you're pointing out. But we've seen index being extremely proactive here in the US and in the rest of the world, not just here. And there is something that we had the opportunity, and when I say we, in this case, the institution that I work for, to support in these days, which was to bring 30 Dominicans, young Dominicans, from the United States to the Dominican Republic who had never been there. And we actually have a great video. It's unfortunate we can't show it here right now. But the reaction of those Dominicans when they went, they got to see the culture, they had a tour of what was going on in the Dominican Republic. It was very inspirational. And that's something that your ministry has done. So I wouldn't sell your ministry short at this point in terms of what you're doing, and I think we're working in that direction.
Well, having you, after you say that, I obviously must respond and say that given the fact that our Vice Minister for Dominicans Abroad is here, Síguenos, who has been extremely busy since she took over her vice ministry 7 months ago, there is no denying that whatsoever. But it's not at the level that I wish.
Certainly, there's more to do.
First of all, you can't put all of the eggs in the basket of index of one institution. I'm speaking of a larger, more coherent a view that looks, again, at the Dominican community in the United States in a more coherent way. And we, throughout all government, and that is still missing.
Certainly. There's certainly more that can always be done. Any other questions?
No more?
thank you. Eric Gama. I'm the CEO of Haina Port, Dominican Republic, where a lot of the U.S. trade happens. Any news on or advancement on getting U.S. immigration into Dominican Republic, locally, like in Punta Cana Airport, or having the U.S. immigration at our country? I mean, I haven't seen any recent news around that.
You're talking about pre-clearance.
Right.
Well,
if it's okay to ask.
No. There is an agreement was signed actually in 2015, and that agreement for pre-clearance at one airport, particularly at the Punta Cana airport, has been pending since then before the Constitutional Court, which is a constitutional requirement. That before it is any international agreement, before it is sent to Congress for approval, must meet constitutional norms. And that is why it's before the Constitutional Court. There have been concerns that one of the annexes of that agreement, which addresses the issues of refugees, compliance with the UN Convention, 1951 Convention on Refugees, and the 1967 Protocol. There are certain requirements, certain conditions on meeting certain levels in that annex, and that has created some concern, as I said, within the country. And that is why the agreement has been in the constitutional courts all of these years. We recently asked the United States to reconsider that annex or the agreement itself, and hopefully we're negotiating now actively with the U.S. government on that particular issue. Hopefully, we can get that a new focus on the issue and get the agreement finally passed through. That's more than I've said more than I should, but.
Any last question from the audience? Well, thank you very much, Minister. Yes.
There is one.
Oh, we do have one. Okay, Roman.
Yeah, no, sir. Well, let me finish with a positive touch. In your presentation, you called the attention that the Dominican Republic has been growing in a percentage of 5% per year, which has encouraged some international institutions to say that the Dominican Republic in a few years would reach the level of a developed country. What do you think that the country should do in order to get to that aspirational point, to be a developed country with this growth of 5% per year?
I think there are three areas that are key for the Dominican Republic to achieve that objective, the objective of 2036. One is truly educational reform. That is number one and high above everything else. And educational reform, in my particular book, means having higher standards for teachers, more involvement, parents' involvement in the education of children, and I'm talking public schooling above all, but private as well. It's not an issue of financing, it's an issue of effectiveness in the amount of money that is being spent. We've spent, and I don't remember now, since 2012, when we started spending 4% of GDP, 4%, yeah, 4%. Did I say something different? 4% of GDP on education. I believe that since then, we may have spent close to $40 billion on education. And we don't have a level of results for that amount of money that we have invested. So unless the hard decisions are taken to reform our educational process, we will be hard-pressed to achieve those goals. The second is judicial reform. We need we need a judicial review first, in-depth judicial review and reform. We have an independent prosecutor, but we're talking about the other side of the judiciary. And then we also, I believe, need labor reform. And that is another of the great pending areas, unless you have greater clarity on the contractual terms. We will continue to have will not be as productive. Our labor sector will not be as productive as it can really be. So those three: education, judiciary, and labor reforms.
Well, thank you very much.
Can I say something before
Certainly.
we close? In terms of foreign policy, being here at the Whole of the Americas, where I've spent so many years of my life, I have to say that we need to work harder. And I mean we, every single country in this hemisphere, in reaching out to the other and having greater dialogue than what we have at the current moment. To us, multilateralism is fundamental. Dialogue is the only path forward. And right now, regionalism is more important than ever, and we're still caught up in so many issues of the past that don't let us move forward as fast as we could possibly move. And other areas of the world are moving with far greater celerity than we are. We truly need greater introspection in our hemisphere and greater patience and tolerance in this Whole of the Americas in this September 2025. Thank you very much.
May I close? Well, thank you very much, Minister, for being with us here today. There's no doubt that the Dominican Republic is progressing, as we saw in the slides, the data that you presented, on various fronts, economically, socially, politically as well. I think your call to action in terms of collaboration is certainly one that all of us share at the American Chamber of Commerce as well in the DR. I think as an island country, the Dominican Republic is one that's clearly looking outward, which wasn't necessarily the case when we began our careers. I remember when I studied economics initially, we were still an import substitution country. So we were looking completely inward, not necessarily outward. And if you look at all of our motors of growth, it obliges us to engage internationally, as you were encouraging us to do, because we have tourism, we have the free zones. You mentioned the investments that are occurring in the country. A lot of those are in the free zones. The ag sector, which has investments, minerals and mining, very important for our country as well. And as somebody who works in the banking sector, you know, we look at the Standard & Poor's, the Fitch reviews of our country, and they certainly point out that we're doing fairly well. I think you mentioned the IMF study as well. That was the report that was garnered after the last visit a few weeks ago, all very positive. But when you see the investments that are coming into the DR from places like Colombia, Brazil, Guatemala, when we have a trade mission, which your ministry organized recently from Bolivia, looking for investments in the Dominican Republic, we're doing something right. So I'm very hopeful, and I think the AmCham is also very hopeful that the dialogue can at least take place in the financial, not in the financial sector, in the private sector during these years. And the DR is certainly well positioned to take advantage of that, thanks to the good work done by yourself, as well as others in the administration. Thank you very much.